So now what I want to do is I want to take my 7 steps and I want to label them. Now if I was using SketchUp Pro, I would likely label them in Layout, which is a program that comes along with SketchUp Pro. But since right now I'm just working with the basic SketchUp Make, I'm going to use a tool called 3D Text to place three-dimensional text to label my steps right inside my model space. So I'm going to do that by going to Tools and choosing 3D Text. So here I can pre-enter my text, and I can see there are some default settings here. I'm going to leave the font, but what I do need to change are the dimensions of the text. So it's by default, it's going to have my text height at 10 inches, and considering the fact that this is a 3-inch by 3-inch cube, that's way too big. So I'm going to change my height to 1 inch, and the extruded height of my text, I'm going to leave that at 1/8. Right? Proportionally, I think that's going to look nice. Yeah, I still think it does. So it comes in, grouped together, and I have my 3-dimensional text. Now, if I decided that I didn't like that text, or I didn't really like the size of it or the color, I can go and double click and I can edit it just like I would any group. I can paint it a different color. And I could also change the size of it using the scale tool. So the scale tool can be found up here. And when I have something selected and I choose scale, I get these different handles. Depending on which handle you grab, you can stretch an object in one direction or proportionately. So if when all is said and done, I think that this ends up being too small, I'm not that worried about it. Okay, so I have my step 1, which is actually going to go all the way over here, right? Because we worked backwards in creating this kind of set of instructions, right? So I have step 1, step 2, so now that I have my steps laid out and labeled, I want to move them around and position them in a way that we can see them all at once, right, without being so zoomed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them in an orientation very similar to what we see in the PDF. So I'm going to do my first 3 steps in one row. And the remaining steps beneath them. So now that I see my 7 steps all together, I think I'm changing my mind about the size of that font. We had originally chosen a 6-inch height for each of these labels, but from a distance they're really illegible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that scale tool and I'm going to scale these up with accuracy. So you can see as I move my mouse, we have a scale factor at the bottom right corner, which adjusts up or down depending on where I move my mouse. So if I were to do a scale factor of 2, it's going to make my lettering twice the size that it currently is. If I was to do 0.5, it would bring it down half the size that it currently was. So what I'm going to do is I really want these to be very clear and visible. So I'm going to do a scale factor of 3. And I'm going to do that for each step. So it's basically tripling the size of my lettering. So the last thing I want to do before I export these steps as a graphic for our instructions that we want to create is I want to get rid of this green background, because I think that if I'm going to create a document that is to be printed, we wouldn't want to print it with that green background. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to Window, and under my tray here, I'm going to bring up my styles. And here we can see, get rid of some of these. We have different styles that we can apply to our model. So wireframe, for example, gets rid of that green background, but also changes all of these individual components to being transparent, right, with no color applied. Right? And each style has its own unique characteristics. So when I create a document that I want to print or plot, I typically choose shaded with textures. So what that does is it gets rid of the background. Right? We still have our axis here, but we get rid of that green background. And we're still showing shading, right, where shading would be present, right, for these like three-dimensional letters and these curved letters. And we're showing textures, right, and colors. In this case, just our simple blocked colors. So when I have my steps laid out, I see that there's no more green background. Now I think I'm ready to go ahead and export a 2D graphic. And what that's going to do is it's going to produce a 2D image. I'm going to keep it as a JPEG. And I'm going to name it Soma Cube Instructions. Okay, so here we have the JPEG that we created, right, by exporting a 2D graphic. And you can see that even without having a program like Layout, we can take our 3D model and we can produce 2D graphics. In this case, we have our instructions, right? So we can show somebody step by step how to put this puzzle together.